All right, welcome back. Conservative ideology. All right, so just to introduce you to what we're doing here, the next three videos are going to kind of more in depth look at each of these three main ideologies: conservative, liberal, and then libertarian. We're going to look at them based on the same categories like markets, taxation, government spending, etc. See what each of those ideological groups typically believe about those specific topics. So our first one is the marketplace. So we're talking about buying and selling of goods. Conservatives usually favor fewer regulations on the market, so more freedom when it comes to being able to buy and sell stuff, make it easier to start businesses, and fewer rules and regulations for those businesses to have to follow. In the future videos, we'll see what liberals and what libertarians say about that same issue. On the matter of taxation, conservatives generally favor lower taxes. This would be especially true for the middle class and those with higher income. Liberals typically like to criticize this conservative view of taxation, and they point out that the biggest beneficiaries of these tax cuts are often those with higher income. Conservatives would probably admit that that's true. However, they would point out the fact that people with higher income already pay a higher share of the taxes. So since they pay more taxes, if you cut everybody's taxes, they will be the ones who benefit the most. But they would argue that these tax cuts benefit everybody. So that's kind of part of your debate there about tax policy. But in general, conservatives favor lower taxes. All right, on the issue of government spending, when we look at liberals and conservatives, you're going to notice that each of them want the government to spend certain money and to be involved on certain things and not in others. They happen to disagree about what the government should be focused on. Conservatives don't really like the government to be involved too much in worrying about trying to promote social and economic equality. So things that provide aid to low income or poor people, like welfare, like food stamps, like certain housing projects, these are things that conservatives usually don't support very much. So they would prefer to have less government involvement in these types of economic equality programs. On the other hand, when those programs are for like people of a certain age, elderly people, like Medicare and Social Security, they tend to support those at least somewhat. I put here on the slide, it says lukewarm support. That means that they kind of support it. They don't oppose it, but they're not necessarily thrilled about these programs either. But because so many old people are Republicans and conservatives, they kind of can't really openly oppose them, whereas they feel more comfortable opposing these programs that benefit the poor. All right, on the issue of military, and I paired it with crime and punishment, which might seem like an odd choice, but I think you'll see that with the three ideologies, it's kind of consistent. Conservatives, they are pro-military, pro-defense. They favor more defense spending. Likewise, they are strongly in favor of law and order, so they typically also, in addition to wanting more defense, they want more security. So more police, stronger punishment for crime, often support things like mandatory minimum sentences, typically don't really support things like the exclusionary rule, things that make it tougher for the police. They are less concerned with the rights of the accused and more concerned with maintaining security, law and order, crime and punishment, those sorts of things. All right, on the issue of privacy and social freedoms, here's where you start to see a shift in the attitude of conservatives. So whereas on economic issues, they typically don't want the government very much involved there, when it comes to issues of privacy and social freedoms, they do favor a stronger active role for the government. So they believe often that the government should protect traditional values, even if this could intrude on individual freedom. So something like being pro-life is a conservative position that obviously restricts the freedom in order to be able to obtain an abortion, but conservatives would typically support pro-life legislation, feeling that the traditional values are more important than that specific freedom. Same thing with things like the Patriot Act and wiretapping and surveillance. These are things that conservatives most often support, even though obviously it is counteracting certain freedoms that individuals possess. But this is seen to strengthen security and protect traditional values. On the issue of education and religion, when it comes to education, conservatives don't oppose public schools per se, but they aren't necessarily as thrilled with public schools or as big supporters as liberals are. So they typically favor less government involvement in education and more choice. So things like vouchers. What a voucher is essentially a coupon that allows a person, a family, to take the money that would have been spent for that student in a public school, and they can take that money and use it to pay tuition to attend a private school. Conservatives support vouchers, including vouchers for religious schools. So they are perfectly fine with taking that taxpayer money and using it to spend to buy tuition to go to a private religious school. Liberals typically don't like that idea very much. And on the issue of public education, conservatives are usually less concerned with Establishment Clause issues than liberals are. So they're not too worried about things like prayer in school, promotion of religion, or Bible reading. Those are things that conservatives usually would think that's okay even in public school. Liberals would clearly disagree. And finally, when you talk about liberty and order, kind of our big picture thing, our conservatives typically favor more economic freedom and liberty, but when it comes to social issues, more crime and punishment, more governmental power there. So freedom economically, but order when it comes to social issues. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button for me, that thumbs up for me. Till next time, this has been a La Money production.